gerbils, please.
Daddy!
Don't do this, no! This mark will remind you of the man who took everything you had.
And the award for the most gratuitous placement of Megan Fox in a film goes to Jonah Hex.
I mean, there's only one scene she's actually pertinent to, and when they build up to it, everything that led before it made you go like, "Wait, huh?"
Yeah, and it's just the only word for it is still gratuitous. It's like there's no reason for her to be here.
Right.
She doesn't figure into the story in any real way. She's only there because they said we got a shot at getting Megan Fox, and someone went, but she's not in the script. Like, oh, you'll find a way to put her in there.
It is pointless, and boy, did they find a way to put her in. I mean, I thought there was a time machine somewhere in that room that she was staying in, because I swear to God, that chick is wearing like Maybelline, like her hair is all
that
nice
is
and
true.
shiny.
I mean,
She
like,
was photographed by Olin Mills.
There's only a
She
couple
was
women in
glowing
here, and every
in some of those
time
scenes.
with the women, they were fully made up. Like even Jonah Hex's Indian wife had on lipstick.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, you guys.
But all the guys in it are just covered in dirt and grime and soot, and every woman. No, seriously, they look like their soft-lit Olin Mills photo.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So in this interpretation of the story of Jonah Hex,
Yeah.
it's the same as before. He's a ex-Confederate soldier.
Yeah. Well, it's not the same as before now.
Okay.
He's an ex-Confederate soldier whose face was scarred from... Did they ever even say in the comic book where it come from?
I don't think they did.
It seems like it's a running joke where people like say, "Why are you so ugly?" or "Where'd that scar from?" And he's like, "I cut myself."
Yeah.
Well, apparently, I heard that in the comic, the tribe of Indians basically did it to him.
Okay.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Or maybe that's just one possible version. Who knows?
Right. Yeah,
Either way,
he's always got some kind of smart ass answer when you ask him.
Either way, it's never been the reason why he does what he does, or at least as far as I know. I mean, his whole thing, the closest he is to a superhero in the comics is just that he has a very personal thing about protecting the innocent. Other than that, he doesn't have superpowers.
Well, but he runs into a lot of weird West things.
He does, but it's only that he's such a badass that he gets out of it.
True. But you know what? Hey, this is a movie. That's the comics. I'm willing to say, like, hey, you know what? You guys are doing your own thing.
Sure.
And that's fine. And what power they gave him, I didn't mind. I actually kind of liked the way they used it.
I did too. I thought that one of the best things about this film is the added conceit that Jonah Hex can touch the dead and can communicate with them.
He's like Miles from Lost.
I wouldn't have minded it if I hadn't seen it done already, like in other films on TV series.
I had too, but the way they did it was good because they made it such an incredibly awful experience for the dead guy, and that's so very Jonah Hex. I mean, I love the fact that while he's bringing them back, they're in agony, and there's a point in the film that it plays into that really cool, like, because his whole thing is like, this film is like, this is all about revenge, and it's nice to see them work that into the story, but that's really one of the only things I can say about this film that I did, in fact, like.
Really? Well, see, the problem I had with what they were doing with that whole, him having the ability to bring people back, and for some reason the crows were involved, it made me really think, of the Crow. I was like, is he like some kind of new version of the Crow? All of a sudden, like they were really trying to grab something that would give him a gimmick in a way for even being considered a comic book character, that they just threw that in just to do it.
Well, that's sort of thing when you come with a pitch for something like this. It's like, hey, we want to do a Western. This character Jonah Hex. Oh yeah? So what makes him special? Not just another cowboy. And you kind of gotta go, well, he deals with the dead and the supernatural, and he can do this. All right, that's something special.
But you read the comic books, and they're still westerns.
Yeah.
This is a western in the same sense that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a period piece. It's just not really. It's still like a Hollywood guy going, well, you got to make it more superhero-y, and that's why Jonah Hex really falls apart.
Well, the thing is, like, you can really make this a companion piece to League of Extraordinary Gentlemen,
or the Avengers.
Even the Avengers. But I mean, like I said, I was still annoyed with this film that they didn't really. All they did was make a typical mediocre standard comic book character film that should have been called The Crow, because it was like the same premise. It's a revenge story. That's basically all it is.
Well, here we've got, and this is very similar to The Crow. Yeah, well, I hadn't even thought of that before, but that's excellent co-host.
Of course, I'm a genius.
Star
when a crow crawled out of his mouth, you didn't.
I didn't actually know. It never came together. But now that I talk about the story here, Jonah Hex, played by Josh Brolin, was a guy who fought for the Confederacy, but not because he liked slave. The film is important to remind you, but because he just didn't like being told what to do. true.
Right.
And
like when the government says, "Hey, stop being an asshole." You don't tell me what to do. I can be as big of an asshole as I want to be.
You seem like
much.
a pissed off Sling Blade.
but in the beginning of this film, we see that after the war, he had a Indian bride and a kid, and John Malkovich shows up as Quentin Turnbull, a guy who used to be his captain, who, after he disobeyed him, he decided he was going to get revenge. Now, we never actually see what happened that that Jonah Hex did specifically to Quentin Turnbull, but apparently it ruined his life.
Well, near as I can tell from what they say, Quentin Turnbull, even though the South lost the war, decided he would go around destroying hospitals. And Hex just said, like, I can't abide by this.
But you don't know specifically what he did to him, because
Well, they keep talking about how he turned him in.
Well, when Turnbull has confronted Hex, which is what we see in the beginning of the movie, and then about 20 minutes later, and then about 10 minutes after that, and then about 30 minutes over, as they show us over and over again, when he's captured him, attached him to, strung him up so he's forced to watch them killing his family in front of him. He's like, "You took away everything I loved." I don't feel like we ever got enough from that. But anyway, so he did that, made him watch, destroyed his soul, and then branded his face with a cattle prod, which Hex later, not one to be marked for anything.
Not a cattle prod, a branding iron.
Branding iron, sorry. Well, not wanting to be branded as anything, decided to burn it all away with a red hot axe himself.
Decided to give himself a vagina on his face.
Yeah. So
it's one of those where you want to look at him and go like, "So, dude, how did that work out?"
Well, to be fair, I think I'd prefer general scarring over
some dude's name,
enemy's icon. I think I could see where he's coming from.
It looked a whole lot better than the KC Masterpiece emblem that originally was on his face.
He did look kind of like a double down sandwich afterwards. He gets information that Turnbull's still alive and that he's planning some horrible, horrible deed because apparently he's a supervillain in the Wild West.
And normally you would call Jim West and Artemis Gordon for something like this.
Exactly. And it felt like, he was going to someone was going to show up in a giant robotic spider at some point.
Yeah.
So they're like, there's only one man who can help us, Jonah Hex. And
the original Captain America.
Pretty much. And who's the Will Arnett?
Yeah, Will Arnett.
Like number one. And you're like, why are you in this movie, Will Arnett? So it turns into Jonah Hex chasing down his mortal enemy and the people who destroyed his family so he can get revenge. And yeah,
that's it in a nutshell.
That's the story.
And that story should have lasted about 15 minutes.
And
it almost did.
Well, it's 72 minutes.
72 minutes. Yeah. That barely qualifies as a feature film.
Well, I mean, did you notice how we didn't mention Megan Fox in the plot synopsis? That's because she's not in the plot.
She's not at all.
She's the most tertiary character of all time.
She's a piece of AIDS.
3 scenes, and only half of one of them she really does anything important to the plot.
You still got that Derringer in your bustle?
No, he took it.
What about that knife in your garter?
Took it.
What about that?
Took it all, Jonah.
Well, searched you for it darn good, didn't they?
Wouldn't you?
All right, look, here's what we're gonna do. You shout for the guard. Get him over here, use your feminine wiles and whatnot. When he gets close... What the hell?
Tallulah Black's mama didn't raise no fool.
Tallulah?
Lala's a nickname.
Tallulah.
The horse should have been the sidekick. Yeah.
I mean, the horse kind of was. I mean, the horse actually showed up and did things, and was an important part of the plot.
Yeah. That horse was the original Batmobile, by the way. With the Gatling guns
totally
and everything.
Was. I mean, yeah, that sequence.
Yeah, that's right.
Early on, where you're like, really, they've attached Gatling guns to a horse, and the horse is just sitting there going, whatever.
Yeah, it's a living. It's a living.
It's the calmest horse of all
see,
time.
I like the fact that that scene you see on the trailers that you grown at, it's in the very first part of the movie, so it gets taken out of the way. It opens with that, and they never go back to it. So it's like, all right, I'll let it go. Yeah. The thing is about this movie is I know this is where I lose everybody because it got 11% on Rotten Tomatoes so far. We're getting down to it. I can tell you guys hate it. I didn't hate the movie. Matter of fact,
I didn't either.
When it started, I liked the look of it. I mean, it's not traditional Western, and I hate when directors try to lean on the fact that hey, it's a comic book. But I was like, you know what? These are interesting visuals. They probably didn't have a huge budget. I just thought, let's pump a lot into the look of it. And I was like, you know what? I'm willing to go with it. I kind of like where it's going. I'm liking Jonah Hex. Mumbles a little too much, but that's cool. It's just that halfway, it just felt like it lost steam and just became so mediocre. And I was like, man, you guys are burning the points that I was giving you.
Well, when it felt like, okay, we need a big ending here, was when they start building towards that in the last reel. You're like, wow, this has just got. I mean, before it was dumb, but it was kind of fun dumb. You know, it was like, wow, there's some clever lines in here that are pretty cute. There's some great Jonah Hex cowboy moments. You're like, wow, that was cool. I love that he just did that. Brolin is good as Hex, generally speaking. But it wants to turn it into the big, like, oh, God, the weapon of mass destruction thing at the end against the United States of America.
Oh, boy, did they. With suicide bombers. I'm pretty sure they didn't have any kind of form of suicide bomber back in those days.
You're just like, okay, whatever, movie. You know, when you lost any sort of, like, cowboyness to this film, then the film is like forgettable as hell.
No, the real villain to this movie is whoever was directing it and the editor.
The editor? Because,
oh my God. Watching that last reel, it seems like they must have shot a whole nother movie and they just decided to scrap it because they're just like, maybe this isn't good. This fight scene that we shot, it isn't good. So they somehow managed to sprinkle it in during the last reel. So it cuts back and forth to like two totally different fight scenes happening with the same characters. And you're just scratching your head like, okay, what the fuck? And before you even can go, what the movie's over.
Yeah.
So,
well, I would say even before you get to the fight scene, in the second reel, it just felt story-wise. Like, there's so many movies we watch where I'm like, man, they could have edited some of this down. You know, you see the Karate Kid, like 45 minutes could have come out. Here, they got too edit happy, where it's edited down to where it's like, wow, anything that would have gave me some empathy with this is just gone.
Yeah. They turned into a short film that should have been thrown on one of those DC animated DVDs that you get as an extra bonus.
Right. It's not a movie of a comic book. It's just a comic book and not a terribly great one is the problem.
Yeah.
It's like reading a lesser issue of Jonah Hex where you're like, I love this character. It's too bad they didn't do something good with him here.
Well, and what hurts me is like, you know, when you're reading your Jonah Hex, you're sitting there enjoying it. Somebody goes like, is that a Jonah Hex comic book? You're like, yeah. Wait, is that the same as that dumb movie that came out? And you're like, no, it's different.
With that Megan Fox bitch? Yes.
You know, this was directed by James Hayward, or Jimmy Hayward, who got his start at Pixar, being a big animator at Toy Story, Bugs Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo. And then, unlike a lot of the guys at Pixar who go and they move on to co-directing, and then they move up and they get to direct a film, and everyone goes, wow, man, that'd be great to work for Pixar. You earn your stripes, you go. He stopped working for Pixar, went on to make robots. And Horton Hears a Who. And now Jonah Hex.
He's the opposite side of the coin where you usually get the guy who works on Toy Story 3, the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah, you look at this, you're like, why was this guy put even in the consideration to make Jonah Hex?
It is that kind of thing where, like, if up to this point where people ask him, like, why'd they fire you at Pixar? Oh, they were just jealous of my talent. At this point, you go like, dude, I don't think that's what it was.
And you know, it's funny you're telling me he's an animator because I was like, I hope to God he wasn't the guy who animated, like, there's like a couple of minutes in the beginning of the film where they're really introducing the character. They're just kind of like throwing you into it. And it's a animated segment that is so poorly animated. It looked like somebody tried to like animate like an oil painting that was awful.
It's more of a motion comic than it is an animation.
Yeah, not even a good motion.
No,
not at all.
And it's really them just really trying to rush you through the origin.
Well, but it seems like they got done filming. They're like, wow, we do only have 30 minutes of film. What are we going to do? Okay, we'll throw the flashback in 4 more times. But they saw that exact same footage. It doesn't matter. We got to make sure it's real clear. Okay, now it's 40 minutes. What are we going to do?
Throw an explosion.
Megan Fox is available.
She's still here. Yeah. She hasn't changed clothes yet.
Let's write her into the film.
She just got done with that Revlon commercial. Just put her in something.
Just throw her right in. Yeah, throw her right into there. And come on, what was up with that corset? I mean, I agree she's sexy, but she was starting to look like one of those freaky corseted people whose waists are like, as big around as a coffee mug.
Right.
I was like, come on, that's fucking gross. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah, that's so gross it's hot.
No, I'm sorry, that is not hot. That is not hot.
I beg to differ.
You need to go seek professional help because
Be that
is not hot.
that professional help will be a prostitute that wears one of those corsets.
I don't mind wearing a corset. I just mean when you get to that point where it's that small, you're like, wow, that's not healthy.
No, I didn't mind. I was like, man, I can do a lot of fun gymnastic sex with that chick.
Yeah.
But you know what? Let's get to the ratings here. I'm going to start and just say, like, it's this surprised me in that it was not as bad as people are saying it is.
Right.
Because there is some things of worth here in a campy, ha-ha sort of way. There's some action sequences in the middle that I thought were actually pretty fucking cool. But it's so ridiculous. I mean, it really is the Avengers ridiculous or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen ridiculous. I mean, it's just pointless, and it's studio meddling all over the place. And this is, at best, I can give it a rental, and that's being kind, I think.
Maybe not for the same reasons, because I was surprised by how much I actually kind of liked that first third of it, the first reel, and the second reel was just kind of like, eh. And the last one was just like, wow, you guys aren't even trying at this point. It's just that you just made it forgettable, which saddened me because I was like, the way it looked, and it had an actual Western meets comic book feels in the beginning. I was like, you know what? They might just pull it off. But I'm with you. I give it a rental. Maybe even a low rental, but a rental.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, there, somewhere in this movie, whenever it was shot, I could tell somewhere there was a good film, at least a decent film.
Yeah.
And yeah, because of the editing and just how they just run through this film with no real point besides just it's a typical mediocre comic book movie that they made. There were parts where I was kind of enjoying it, especially Josh Brolin. I mean,
yeah,
I was waiting for him to drop the ball, but he never really did anything that made me go, dude, really, what the fuck were you thinking? But yeah, as much and I was torn about this. But I'm gonna have to be honest and just give it some old bullshit.
Okay.
Only because as much as I'd love to say it's a rental, just that last reel just really it's like somebody honestly threw in a dead dog into the whole film and just ruined it.
It did to this film what John Malkovich did to Jonah Hex's face. Which, by the way, that is one of the big faults here as far as how they did it was the makeup, because, I mean, poor Josh Brolin, he has to spend the whole movie kind of speaking
that's
this.
How the real Jonah Hex would have to talk.
I know, but it's watching it, you're hyper aware of it at all times.
Oh, see, I like that. To me, it brought, your attention back to the scar, like, hey, don't forget that this is here.
It just didn't sound tough, is all I can say. I just made me laugh.
I'm surprised you understand what he's saying. Most times,
well, it does get a little.
I just talking shaving. You had a toothpick, and I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing.
I'm gonna let you keep going.
Did you not get grossed out watching Megan Fox loving on?
Yeah, I was about to say that was like the biggest.
Throw up.
Yeah, I was like, really? I mean, you could look that fucked up and still get Megan Fox.
See,
well, really?
How could you guys be upset about that? I'm like, well, hey, if she doesn't mind this guy, I got a shot. Yeah, I got a better than decent shot.
Yeah, he took a look at her thumbs and was like, nobody else is going to want you but me, baby.
What happened to your face? Cut myself shaving. What happened to yours?